Welcome, everybody, to another episode of We All Grieve. I'm your host, Kay Rogers, and I am joined by a very special guest today and a very good friend, Lisa Dodson. Hi, Lisa.
Hi there. How are you, Kay?
Well, I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you agreed to come in and do an interview. I know I was supposed to interview you last week, and I had a little mishap with my dogs. It was the grossest thing I've ever seen. Anyway, so Lisa, you've gone through some things in your life. It's been pretty tough. You were married for a long time, the same man, great man, and unfortunately, he passed away. So I thought maybe I'd just go ahead and kind of turn the floor over to you and just kind of let you take us through, to just share your story and kind of step us through everything.
Sure. Well, my name is Lisa Dodson, and I am actually the community outreach specialist for downstate for Gift of Hope Organ and Tissue Donor Network, and I'm also a donor wife. And I've been in this field for almost 20 years, which I started when I was 5. You know, it's been a long time ago.
You've aged wonderfully.
But currently working on behalf of community outreach the last 4 years is actually a different part of the business than I had been in, or the field, I like to call it, not business, but a different part of the field than I had historically been in. And interestingly, my current role in community outreach started in 2016, which is about the same time that my husband, Dan, died. And I'm going to kind of weave both of my role at Gift of Hope in with my story about Dan, because I often say I feel like the stars aligned in the universe, and that my journey really brought me to the role that I'm in. And now that I'm in the club of being a donor family and working for the organization that facilitates and educates and supports donor families, sometimes it's kind of something that I feel is bigger than me.
Okay. And I can see that.
Yeah.
I really can.
So, like I said, I think that was one piece of my life that was preparing me for my life after Dan. So I'll talk more about that later, but I love telling the story about Dan and I because it's kind of unique. We started our life when I was 18 years old, and I'm currently 58, not 25. So, but I tell it because at the time I was just finishing my senior year in high school, right? And unfortunately, I was one of those girls that didn't get invited to senior prom because my boyfriend at the time, my love of my life in high school, broke up with me shortly before senior prom.
Oh, no.
So needless to say, I was in a weird place then too, but some girlfriends and I were like, you know what, we're going to make a night of it. We're going out, blah, blah, blah. And it was that night that I didn't get to go to prom with my boyfriend, but instead of having a date for prom, I met my future husband.
Wow. Now, where did you guys meet at?
We actually met, he was a couple years older than I was. So even though we both went to Richwoods High School, I did not know him and he did not know me. Richwoods was extremely big. I had over 500 kids just in my class.
Wow. It's still a big school.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still a real big school.
Exactly. And so we actually met at Detweiler Park. And it was sort of a party night, and he was there with some guys in my class and, different ages. And so it all started the night of my senior prom.
That's something. Who would have thought it lasted as long as it did, right?
Right? So we were actually married for 31 years and together 36 before he passed.
Wow.
Yeah, so we have two, I tell people that we have the most amazing humans on earth as two sons, adult sons at this point, and I have two beautiful granddaughters. So, and fortunately, we're all doing quite well. In fact, my oldest son just graduated from the police academy.
I seen that on Facebook. That's amazing.
Yes, and his dad was with the Peoria County Sheriff's Department. So he took a long way getting there. He was actually a physical education teacher for 10 years first.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and then my younger son lives here in Metamoris, so he's close by. My older son lives over by Springfield.
Okay.
So anyway, fast forward from our marriage in 1985 to 2014. And that was when Dan was actually diagnosed. And leading up to that, we knew something was wrong. He'd seen a lot of doctors, was having health issues, but nobody diagnosed what was going on until December of 2014. And earlier that year, he had retired from the Peoria County Sheriff's Department. So, again, he had retired, started kind of a second career, and was really struggling with pain and fatigue and different things. Finally diagnosed in December of 2014 as having renal cell carcinoma, which is kidney cancer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And when we went to the doctor, I'll never forget the doctor saying, this is not your typical neighborhood kidney cancer. And not really knowing what that meant, he went on to explain that Dan actually not only had one kidney that was going to have to be surgically removed with the cancer, but he also had a 6.5-pound tumor that had to be removed. So in January, he had surgery.
So I'm just going to take you back just a little bit here in the story.
Absolutely.
So was your guys' first indication that something wasn't right was really just kind of like the fatigue and some of that pain and stuff? And how long did that go on before he finally said, hey, you know what, babe, I'm going to go to the doctor. I just don't feel right.
Actually, we'd been to the doctor. We'd been to emergency rooms. He was actually medically transported from a community hospital to a major hospital and was diagnosed with a, blood clot. And so we were sent home, for him to give injections. And so it was unfortunately one of those things that was just totally missed.
It was completely missed.
Completely missed.
I mean, a 6.5-pound mass?
Right? I mean, that's like a baby. That's like this, if you think about it. But Dan was a big guy. He was 6'3", and, probably over 230 pounds. And so he could carry, obviously he did, without any kind of physical indication that was going on. But obviously when we heard that existed, it was a shock. And then because it was so large, it had actually protruded into what's called his inferior vena cava. And so when he went into surgery to have all this removed, they actually had to have a heart surgeon as part of the surgical team because they thought they might have to do open heart surgery. So it was invasive, it was extensive, but he came through it like a rock star. And we thought, this is great. I mean, his recovery was fairly quick. He got discharged.
Hey, we're on the mend. This is good. We're good now.
We're good, except then came the next wave, which was having some follow-up. It was determined that the cancer was in his lymph system. And so at that point, it became a terminal diagnosis. And with a life expectancy of probably up to 2 years, which they hit that pretty close. That was pretty close what his lifespan was following the diagnosis.
So was there any treatment in that 2-year time span that he was doing to just kind of help?
Yes. He was, the first year we opted for some alternative therapies. Like we went through a chiropractor who herself had been treated in her younger years for cancer. And so we did some natural types of things. And actually, he felt pretty good that first year. But then the cancer started to spread. And so then we had to start. It wasn't a traditional, it wasn't chemo, but it was some type of immune suppress type of treatment. So because it wasn't chemo, he didn't lose his hair. But the fatigue and the pain and all of those kinds of things continued. So he actually, that would have been in the year he died, he started the traditional therapy route. So we went to the Cancer Care Center where he received treatment. It was actually kind of a trial-based thing. It wasn't specific for kidney cancer, but they had had some luck with it. So anyway, that last... Let's fast forward, because I'm just going to say as a general brushstroke that the first year and several months into the year 2016 were rather good for the most part, knowing he was living. And, you know, I have to give Dan so much credit for really being that guy that doesn't complain a lot, really looks out for the people around him, especially me, because I was working full time. And so he spent a lot of restless nights up and about calling friends and family so that I could sleep to go to work the next day. And there's really something to that song, Live Like You're Dying, you know, that Tim McGraw song, because Dan was always a very... you know, a person to let you know how he loved you and physically demonstrative and all that kind of stuff. But he expanded that outreach as far as, you know, people really feeling that from him. And then if we fast forward, truly, I did not know, and he, I don't think knew, but I think he was ready. He was getting ready to be, you know, to die, to be gone. So we fast forward to around the October timeframe of 2016, and Dan died on November 14th of 2016. Things had gotten worse. We had made quite a few trips to the emergency room. And he was having internal bleeding. He was having just a lot of indications that it was starting to go downhill fast. And in fact, you know, I look back at that time. We tried to take a vacation in late September to Florida. We drove and we got there. And of course, whatever this internal bleeding was had gotten really bad throughout the course of us driving. And when we got there, we were told he had called the Cancer Care Center and his physician, and they were like, you've got to get to an emergency room right now. Because he was, one of the things, I don't know if you know that much about internal bleeding, but one of the indications of that is that you have very tarry stools.
Yeah, I have heard that.
And it's a really, not to be too detailed, but there is an odor that accompanies internal bleeding. And here we were, just gotten settled at the condo, just, you know, had drove 16 hours or whatever. We were by Destin in Florida, and we were told we had to turn around and go home. They wanted us to go to an emergency room in Florida, and I knew if he got hospitalized, he was going to be there. And I was like, oh no. So he was literally almost comatose in bed. I packed everything back up and drove him straight through from Florida to the emergency room at OSF. So that was about a month, maybe 6 weeks before he went to the hospital the final time. And again, the internal bleeding, all the things that were indicative that things had gotten much worse. So again, this is another one of those, did I really survive this? So the week of him, and we didn't know he was going into the hospital for the last time, right?
Okay.
But earlier that same week, we get a call, and my oldest son had been in a serious dirt bike accident. And who was calling me was the life flight nurse that had come from OSF to Beardstown, which is located by where he lives.
And that's where he had his accident on the motorcycle.
Yeah. And I was like, bring him to Peoria. Because my son's like, I mean, this is just a funny offside of the story, but he's like, Mom, I can't afford to be life flighted, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, get your ass in the helicopter. He couldn't do it, but they're going to put you in it, Kyle, and you're coming to OSF.
I don't think you understand. I'm not asking.
That's right. Non-negotiable.
And so when all this is going on, I know you were working with the Gift of Hope at that time, and you probably had a lot of people that you knew at the hospital, right? So
yes.
Did you feel like you had some pretty good structure there to support you when you were going through a lot of this stuff?
Actually, I give OSF a lot of credit. Not necessarily did I personally know people, but I felt like, for the most part, we got really great care. And of course, my colleagues that work in the hospital and other Gift of Hope people. And it was extremely important for me. At one point, going back to when he had to have surgery, they didn't know if they were going to be able to coordinate that between a heart surgeon and all of the people that had to be present. So they're like, we might have to send you to Cincinnati. And I'm like, no. I want to be in my hometown with my support structure.
Well, yeah. You have nobody in Cincinnati. Well, I mean...
No. I wouldn't have. No, it would have just been me.
That's terrible.
And so they made it happen. So again, once I let them know my objections and how strongly I felt, they made it happen. So
I imagine you probably have a way to convince people, right?
I can be pretty darn stubborn if I need to be.
I would have never guessed that.
Absolutely. You picked up on that, right?
Yeah.
But so for several days, so Kyle comes into OSF on a Sunday. Dan goes into OSF through the emergency room on that Thursday. So for several days, I had both of them one floor apart at OSF.
How did you not pull all your hair out?
You know what? There's something about, people often refer to me as being strong. And I guess I am. I don't think of it that way. I think of it as I'm wired to, okay, now what do we need to do? Okay, this is what's happening. What do we need to do? So we did what we had to do. Mm-hmm. And my younger son was such a support, Cole, that lives here locally. So I do have to tell you, at one point I was very tired and just sort of in that fog, because my son had to have surgery. He had some major injury and he had to have surgery. And I remember going, I don't know if I left Dan's room or his room, but I went to where the surgical waiting room was, and I told him I was there for Dan Dodson. And they're like, we don't have a Dan Dodson on surgery today, on the surgery schedule. I'm like, well, do you have a Dodson? They're like, well, we have a Kyle Dodson. That's him. That would be the one I'm here for.
That's my son. Yeah, that's who I'm here for. Yep.
So anyway, Kyle gets discharged that weekend, but he's on total bed rest. He's not ambulatory yet. So he goes back to my house, and Dan is still in the hospital, and then things really started to go south for him. He was actually moved to a hospice floor. And Dan ended up dying on November 14th, and he was a cornea donor. And so I want to make that point because a lot of people think that cancer is an automatic rule out, and it's not. He was a rule out. He didn't have a brain death, so he wasn't eligible for organ donation. And because he did have active cancer, it ruled out in terms of other tissues, skin, bone, so forth. But he was able to be a cornea donor. And 2 men in Michigan have the gift of sight from my husband, 2 different men. So anyway, I think that is really something that a lot of times gets missed by the public is, we have organ tissue, which is, it includes eye, but oftentimes we say organ tissue and eye donation. So I often tell people, don't rule yourself out. Let us determine, let Gift of Hope determine your medical eligibility, because that's our job. What we need folks to do, the public, is to register.
Make that commitment.
Yeah, exactly. Register, and then let us do the job of determining which path that you're eligible to go down in order to make your wishes, in order for us to be able to see through your wishes.
Before Nick passed, I never really gave organ donation much of a thought. Didn't think much of it. I didn't really know anything about it, right? I think everybody understands what it is. I mean, I knew that much, but I had never really said, yeah, I want to do that. I just never took the time to really understand it, right? And so then after Nick went down on, that day on Father's Day, and then we're sitting in the hospital, and they had already told us, we weren't getting him back. There was no chance. He was for the most part at that point probably brain dead, but we just had to wait for the test the next day to get, to go in there and confirm it. But it was funny because my wife, Pam, just sat there and said, "Hey, and it was me and Pam, and then his mom and his stepdad, and we're all sitting in the room next to where he is, and we're just kind of sitting there in a fog, just like it all just happened so fast, right? Right. And Pam just says, "Well, what about organ donation?" And we're all just like, "Well, yeah." Yeah. We didn't even have a conversation. We said, yeah. So I went and told the nurse there at the desk and said, "Hey, we want to be organ donors, for Nicholas. We want to donate his organs." And so that's when our process started. But I'm always, the point of that anyway, is that I'm always thinking to myself, how little did I really know back then? Right. And how much I've learned over the last, 10 and a half years that he's been gone, and doing the advocacy work and talking to different people and meeting different people. The impact is so much more than what people understand. Correct. It's not that you're just saving a life. You are, right? You are saving lives. You're giving a gift. Right. But you're giving that gift to everybody else around that person too. Well, first, before I comment on that point, I just would like to say that, and acknowledge and recognize that you truly have been one of those rock star advocates, ambassadors for Gift of Hope. And we truly are grateful because we all know that the power of the stories that we have all lived through is really what influences people to consider donation. And you and your family have really just owned that. And I know for me, it's kind of like going back to what I said about the universe aligning, because this role actually started for me after Dan died, because the position was appointed to me during that time. And of course, I took time off after his death. So it truly started in 2017. And I believe that it was one of those pieces of my journey that was to help me to define my new normal after Dan died. Yeah, that's such a true statement, the new normal. Yeah. And I don't think people understand how profound those two words really are after coming out of the other side of something like this.
Right. Right.
One, I want to say thank you for the compliment. I do appreciate that. But number two, I'll be honest with you, I do it for very selfish reasons. I always love talking about my son.
I was just going to say, you know what? I think that's the greatest gift that donation gives us.
Yeah.
And I, too, have, although I'm not a shy person, so I include Dan in daily conversations. I continue to do that. But yet, it also gives me, my job gives me a platform, right? Just like you in your role as an ambassador, you have a platform to speak about your son in so many different places. And that is so therapeutic.
It really is. That's why I started doing it.
Yeah.
Because I just love talking about him. And not that I don't love talking about all my other children, and I've got, you know, 7 grandkids. I mean, I got people everywhere, right? But, you know, I look at Nicholas as the one that got away, right? He beat me to it. That's all right. I'll see him eventually. But I get to talk about that 11 years I had him. And to your point, like with Dan, you guys were married. Jeez.
31 years.
31 years, and you were together, what?
36.
36 total. I mean, that's a lifetime. You met him when you're 18 years old. You knew nothing else your entire adult life up until where you're at today. So, I mean, anytime I think we can share those stories about the person that we lost is healthy and therapeutic.
You know, I don't apologize to people because, of course, you know, I'm in a different place now where I am trying to figure out that relationship thing as far as with someone else and I mean, I have just come out at very different times and just said, you know what? This man was a part of my life for 36 years. I have 2 adult sons, you know, with him, and I'm going to talk about him. And if you're not comfortable with that, then I'm sorry the fact that I may just need to say,
see ya.
See ya.
Well, I think the idea that you wouldn't talk about him, that, you know, if you were to find somebody that you decided you wanted to be in a relationship with, that person needs to understand, like you said, the majority of your life was spent with him. So you're going to have those conversations. And that person really should be open and accepting of that and be able to talk with you about that. Right. And I know a lot of people aren't.
Absolutely.
I mean, I run into when people are talking to you and then they find out that I lost a son, you can see the direction that it just turns. You can see it. And it's not me.
Yes.
You know, because trust me, I'm the one that's living with it. So I know what it feels like. Right.
Right.
But you can just see how uncomfortable it makes some people when you have that conversation. And I get it. You know, death is an uncomfortable topic. It
is.
But the point is we all have to go through it. We all will get there.
That's right.
When it's our time. We don't know that, but
that's right.
I mean, we should be able to talk about the ones that we lost and be able to talk about them fondly and just have a really good laugh sometimes about it. And other times we just have a really good cry. It doesn't matter. Yes,
you know what? I often tell the story, and I think sometimes people don't know how to take me because
you were quite bubbly.
I am not. I don't even like the word widow. I don't even like it. I don't use it. Except when I have to fill out forms and it says widow, I have to check it, you know?
Right, yeah.
But I tell this story not at all, but for Dan and I, being playful and humor and all of that had always been a part of our relationship. And so we really tried to make that continue that, let's say, as a part of our relationship. And so, you know, even silly little things like, I know we went grocery shopping one day, right? And we come home and his job was to bring it in and my job was to put away. And Dan was feeling tired and starting to get a little grumpy. And I was like, hey, you have cancer. You are not dead. You bring those groceries into the kitchen right now.
He did it, didn't he?
And he did it, and we laughed. And, we always said, we're going to figure out how to live with cancer, not die with it.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes I think certain things come to me from a place that I can't define or describe. But sometimes, and I think that's where people perceive me as strong, but truly, I try as hard as I can to look for the blessings. So this may sound strange to people too, but I have very open conversations with my kids. I always have, and as adults, we've continued to do that. And I told them, I said, I've made peace with your dad's death. I made it when he died, actually. And here's the reason that I think maybe my grief might be different than somebody else's. Because this is going to be a very selfish statement. But my husband died looking like Dan and functioning to a certain degree like Dan. He didn't go into a long-term care facility. He didn't, lose weight to the point that it wasn't him physically. He had his hair. He died with dignity. He died in a way that people that got to see him, even on his deathbed, knew that was Dan.
He didn't lose himself in the process.
And I didn't lose him in the process. And honestly, I think that was one of the blessings with Dan's death, was that I think whatever higher power you might believe in, I think the gift to me was somebody saying, you know what, we know how, or I know how much you can handle. And what you can handle is your husband leaving this earth and being in a form that I knew him in. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
And again, going back to those conversations with my kids, I'll never forget, even early on when he was first diagnosed as being terminal, they asked me, what can we do for you? What can we do for you and Dad? And I said, honestly, you can live your life. And you can live it without this being an excuse not to. I would expect nothing less from you. And so if I'm going to hold them to that standard, I have to hold myself to that standard too.
You have to live to that too. You have to.
And truly, Dan and I had quality. We didn't get the quantity that I thought we would in the number, as far as having our retirement. You know what I miss the most? Number one, I miss my best friend. He was truly my best friend. So when people talk about that, losing their best friend, I totally get that. And I know he knows, but the fact that my oldest son now has 2 daughters and we had 2 boys, my husband would have adored, of course, grand boys too, but grand girls.
Oh, he'd have been all over that.
Oh, my gosh.
And I can tell you, they know how to melt you like butter.
Right?
And I've got them. And they know, Grandpa K.
Oh, exactly.
I mean, there's no fight in you.
There's not. And I, I just, of course, I couldn't be in the hospital. The youngest daughter was just born a couple weeks ago. And want to hear something crazy? My daughter-in-law's due date was Dan's birthday, September 25th. She actually ended up having the baby on September 24th. But even that was, I don't know. I always look for signs that he's still around because I believe he is.
Oh, he is. Absolutely.
And,
I believe Nicholas is around.
Right? And so that was one of my signs, like when it was even just the due date. I mean, she could have delivered a week before, a week after, but just the fact that her due date was his birthday. I was like,
how ironic can that be?
How cool is this? So I really strive to look for those blessings. And just like, here's another blessing. I told you how I felt that if he had to die, I was happy that he was able to die with dignity. And I was happy that I was able to know him and see him the way that I was comfortable with, And then I don't know, it's one of those things where the silver lining, I told you that my oldest son, Kyle, was in the hospital at the same time. Well, when he was released, he was non-ambulatory. So he came to my house, which I live here locally in East Peoria, and he was with me for a month before he returned home and to his job. And, he had to go through some therapy and blah, blah, blah. But truly, that was the best, that was the best gift that I could have had. And my other son lives here locally, so we'd have slumber parties. My younger one would come over, the older one was there, and they just I think it was good for all three of us. It was a really, really special bonding time, and we're kind of like that three-legged teepee. We're our own little tribe. Of course, my older son is now married and has 2 girls. My younger son is engaged. But there's a special bond between the three of us that I treasure.
When you guys were able to spend that time together, and especially that was the last bit of time that your husband had left, and you guys were all able to do that as a family unit together. I mean, that is a blessing. I took a month off work. Kyle didn't have a choice. He couldn't go back to work. Yeah, he was broken a little bit.
My other son was working, but he would come and spend a lot of time with us. So, not a lot of people get that gift after you lose, me, my husband, for them, their father, their dad. And it was really a special time. And I think it was one of those blessings. And did I want my son in the hospital at the same time as my husband?
That's probably a no.
That's a no. But looking back, I wouldn't have had it any other way. Now, I've told him no more dirt bike accidents, but under those circumstances and the outcome and so forth, and he was fine. He did recover fully, thank God. But yeah, it was really a special time.
So you're going through this time. You guys are there together. You're bonding like crazy, and that's the time that you're going to bond the most, I think.
Right.
And not just in tragedy, but also in some of the happiest times of your life. You have there's always those special moments throughout your life you can think about when something really just kind of really solidified those relationships, right?
Right.
And not that you don't have a relationship with your sons or whatever, right. but it changes them. It makes them stronger. It makes them, I don't know if it's that, maybe it gives them more depth or something. I'm not sure how to exactly say it, but it does change that relationship in a way that's a positive, right? So you've got that. You took your month off work, right? So you're coming into your new role now that you haven't done yet.
That's right.
And you haven't done yet. So can you take just a second, kind of tell the listeners, if they're not familiar with who you are or what you do, what your role is in the Gift of Hope?
Right. So, sure. So Dan, died November 14th, 2016. And for all intents and purposes with the holidays and everything, let's just say I started January 1.
Okay.
of 2017. And what's interesting about my role is, so Gift of Hope has always had a community affairs, community outreach function. However, it's primarily been located in the Chicagoland area. And so they had decided that we needed a downstate program. So I came into the role as the manager of that program to kind of develop, create it, identify with community partners, build relationships, reach out to the ambassadors that had, been really working on behalf of Gift of Hope, but not really with anyone down here to help them with some just guidance, being a resource, etc. So like yourself, I remember when I called you, I had a list of names of people that were, very involved with Gift of Hope downstate. And being from the Peoria area, of course, I knew you, but we've gotten to know each other better.
Oh, yeah.
And you were one of those folks that I considered like a critical resource. It's like, before I start doing anything, I want to know a little bit about the history. I want to know a little bit about how people feel, what do they think needs to be done, and so forth. So one of my first tasks in building this program was to reach out to ambassadors like yourself. The other thing that I decided was I wanted a community-based advisory committee of community leaders that could also assist us in building this downstate program. And at the time, my directive was really to focus on Peoria, see what works, develop a plan, and then if it worked, replicate it in other downstate communities. So one of the bases for me was this life-saving leaders group. And so same thing that I did with you. I made phone calls. I set up personal appointments with the Peoria mayor, the sheriff, the coroner, hospital leaders, the Peoria chief's manager, the riverman. I really just kind of went for a diverse group and also wanted ambassadors on this community advisory committee. So that was really the foundation for me of launching and hearing from them where and how we could make an impact in building a donation culture for the Peoria area. And my colleagues on the hospital side had been doing that and working to build a donation culture in the hospital, because obviously we're at the bedside when someone dies.
Right.
And there has to be processes, there has to be education. What does the hospital staff do? What do we do? But what I saw my role was, and it was like, how you get weird ideas at weird times. It was like this idea popped into my head that my role, or community outreach, the role is going to be to bridge community to clinical. So our role, and I've engaged the ambassadors and my community partners and so forth, is really that of everything, I want the community, the public, to know who Gift of Hope is, to trust us, and also to be informed in making a decision about registration. So that was really kind of the basis of everything. And then the events and the initiatives and all of the really, I've gotten to do some super cool stuff with really, my community partners have really become my friends. We're in it together. If I can help them with something and reciprocate their support, happy to do it.
Right. Yeah. And so it's a very diverse group, I will tell you. being on that group, being in the group with you and meeting all the different people, it is very diverse. There's some really good conversations we've had in those meetings, and I've really enjoyed them.
Thank you.
Hopefully when we get past this
Yes.
COVID thing, we can kind of get back and hit the ground running. I think everybody's getting a little wore out on being in with the pause button being hit, but it's a necessity. We have to do it,
Right.
Hopefully we can get the vaccine here soon enough and everybody can kind of get on with their normal lives. But yeah, it's really interesting. I've met some people I've never thought that I would have met before, and listening to their perspectives and how things can be driven for improvement has been really critical, because there's been some really neat ideas out there.
Absolutely. In fact, I'll give a shout out. This is just one example of a partnership that I really treasure, and it's more of a statewide. Excuse me. But as you know, back in, was it 2017? The legislation, the Drive for Life Act.
Yes.
That allows 16 and 17-year-olds to register, right?
Yes. Yep.
And again, kind of trying to think big picture. I was like, what's a platform that we could really reach a lot of high school students? Well, the Illinois High School Association, the IHSA. So my colleague and I reached out to them, and we formed a partnership to be a part of all of their state finals, different venues, different sporting events across the state, and to use that platform to educate, awareness, registration, so forth. And I really cannot say anything but good things about their commitment to that. In fact, to the point, as we all know, this year has put, the cease on any large gatherings. And we were scheduled to be a part of March Madness, the boys basketball state finals here in Peoria in March. And 2 days before they were to begin, everything got shut down. So no state finals for basketball, and as it turns out, for a number of sports this year. But March Madness is really the biggie.
Oh, that's huge.
That
is
it's
a
2
huge
weekends.
programs. Yeah.
So I reached out to my contact at the IHSA, and, you talk about trying to do things differently during this COVID. Of course, we couldn't just cease all awareness and education kind of efforts. The need is there. There is a need for donation. So we reached out to the IHSA, and we designed a Say Yes virtual registration through their social media platform and their website. And we featured donor athletes that had participated, in all different types of the IHSA sports. And we featured those athletes. We actually, really honored them as having their picture and, the fact that they were a donor on the IHSA website. And we ran a 3-day virtual registration, and just really basically to promote, awareness. They have a large following. People are always checking their website on the status of things. So we had a video of our CEO. We honored these donor athletes. We provided information and videos. It was really cool. But that was an example of them. They could have very easily said, you know what, we're not doing anything right now because the traditional stuff is on halt. It's on, hold. But no, they worked with us. We pivoted and made this virtual campaign in light of the limitations of what we were facing.
Well, and I think this, again, looking for the blessing, right? Because I, come with this COVID and everything that people have been put through. I think the blessing is that it has forced people to think differently and outside the box and become more creative in the ways that they try to engage the public.
Right.
Exactly. And virtual, is kind of I think it's proven that, people still can communicate effectively through virtual means and whatever platform they use to do it. Right.
Right.
Obviously, everybody wants to get back to normal. I think we will eventually. We're going to have to. I don't think people will stand for this for forever. Right.
Right.
People's patience run out. Midwestern people especially don't like to be told what to do. So
little rebel in us.
But, until then, we have to think, how can we still at least make the effort to, even if we get that message just to one person, right?
Right.
How do we continue to do that? That's why I do this podcast.
And it's a great example of that creative sort of non-traditional. I've done podcasts for the IHSA and for some other community-based organizations, and I think you're exactly right as far as, so we've had this sort of traditional, not that we haven't used social media or we haven't used the media or print, but this time has really allowed us to explore some new outreach efforts and methods. And so when these traditional community-based events come back on, I see it as we now have kind of another tool in our toolkit, right? So we've always known and done what I consider to be a pretty great job with community-based events and education.
Oh, yeah, I think it's been outstanding.
So now we have learned some things about this whole virtual world. And so even when those other, when we get back to large gatherings, I think our new normal in all of this with community outreach will be a combination of those things. And, one of the things that we've done really well during this COVID experience is to develop toolkits, which we really hadn't focused on that before, but really a whole package of different things when we have our signature campaigns, like National Donate Life Month. Right now is Hispanic Heritage Month. We just came off of National Donor Minority Awareness Month. We're going into Faith and Hope Month. So, but what's really cool now is, as an organization internally, we've put our resources into developing toolkits that we can share with our ambassadors, with our community partners, and all of those folks now have materials to be able to distribute to support these campaigns through their own social media or their own websites. So it's kind of provided this whole new layer.
Back when I first met you, which I believe was right after you took over the role, that was in 2017 when we first met.
It was. You were one of my first people.
Yeah, we met over there at Hardee's in El Paso and had lunch, me and you and my wife did.
Yes.
So, and I've watched the evolution of how this has gone on over the last few years. I've been doing advocacy work since 2011.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's when I started.
Wow.
I think I don't have it in here. I must have it in here. Anyway, because I got I received my award from the Gift of Hope in 2014.
Okay.
And that's back when Heidi Scheiberger was the donor advocate resource person. I can't remember. And now it's Ullman, and Ullman does a fantastic job. As a matter of fact, I just talked to him last week. I'm doing a talk Friday morning at St. Francis at one of the toolboxes there that they have for their teams or whatever when they do the turnovers.
Yes.
So I'm going to meet him there in the morning and do a little advocacy work then.
Good.
And if you haven't noticed, most people that know me in the organization realize I love to do the talks.
Right.
I love doing any of the speeches.
We've had you for conferences and all kinds of things.
Yep. And I've always openly admitted my least favorite thing to do is community fairs.
Yeah.
I've never liked that. And it's not that I don't enjoy it. I do. I just don't think the impact is as powerful as if we focused on some other areas. Not that we shouldn't do them. We probably should. I mean, it's still working. You still have that opportunity. But I've always just felt, you have a less of an audience in those types of events because most people just try to shy away and get away from you,
Right.
So, but I love doing the work. I love the opportunity to do the work. That's why I love bringing people in from the Gift of Hope. I did an interview with Kelvin Martin a few episodes ago and talked about his life-saving organ that he received, his heart. And it was a really good interview. And now I forgot my point. Where was I going with this, Lisa? Oh, I was talking about the evolution of the program. There was not that much focus on it downstate like we see now. Back when I started, it was a different environment. I found in some cases there were probably some people that had some hurt feelings, and in my own opinion, I thought they were doing it for the wrong reason. I don't think doing anything for recognition is good. I think you do it because you want to do it, and you do it because you love to do it, right? And I've seen the investment, and I'm not talking about the financial investment. I'm just talking about the investment from the Gift of Hope into the downstate with the support, putting people in places, working with communities, trying to develop more of the ambassador based type groups. And man, it's, look at it now. I mean, life-saving leaders, you've got, the advocacy group down here that's just crazy big.
Well, let's just take a moment and brag.
Right.
So the Peoria chapter, our ambassadors, and really, when I say Peoria chapter, I should really say Central Illinois, because these folks are so committed. We have people that drive like an hour and 15 minutes to come to our chapter meetings.
Yeah.
Craig Cotter is one.
He's one. He drove an hour and a half up here. I said, well, Craig, I could have done it over the phone. All you had to do was tell me.
Exactly. But he comes, of course, we're not having the in-person meetings right now, but, he's faithfully there at those face-to-face meetings when we're having them. But we have the largest ambassador group of anywhere in the state, and that includes the Chicagoland area.
That's amazing.
And I give a lot of credit to Susie Sturm, who you interviewed with Craig, who is our leader for the Peoria chapter. I have to pat myself on the back, though, because I recruited her for that position.
Nailed it.
Uh-huh.
Oh, and she's just a ball. No wonder.
Right?
I mean, she's just a ball. I mean, she don't ever stop. That's what she's going to do, which, you know what? She got her life back.
Exactly.
She received her
passion is...
Yeah, you're never going to take that away from her.
She has passion. In fact, I had nominated her, and she received a Life-Saving Partner Award from Gift of Hope.
And well-deserved.
And...
I think that was in 2018, right? Or 19?
I'm trying to think. Was it last? I think it was last year.
I think it was 19, yeah.
And when of course, we have a big shindig to honor these folks, right, up in Chicago. And
it's fancy.
And because you've received the award.
Yeah, it's fancy.
And so I had to do a presentation because I was the one that nominated her. And I mean, basically I said, number one, if we could clone her, we'd be golden. Just in terms of throughout the state. And number two, she talks about that passion and purpose are a great alarm clock. And she lives that.
Mm-hmm. She does.
And that energy, her vibe, it's contagious.
The interview I did with her and Craig was fun.
Yeah.
I mean, and them two just bounce off. But their story, just the way that, from a donor or just an overall advocate, and I've heard so many different stories, but nothing quite as unique as what theirs is.
I think that story is, I think it needs to be like on Ellen or, it's so incredible. And I'm not going to go into it because you already interviewed them. But, that is, I would I don't think I'm stretching too far out to say that's like a 1 in a million shot. First of all, the way that they became connected through the Bob Seger.
The complete randomness of how that even happened.
And you want to hear something really cool? I was at that Bob Seger concert.
Were you really?
I was. So when they kept referring to that, it was like, hey, it was a pack. I mean, it was a great concert. But yeah, the fact that of all those people in a sold out crowd, those two connect twice.
Yeah, twice. And then just how small that world was. So people, if you want to go listen to episode, I think that was number 30 or 29. No, I think it was number 30. Take a listen. It's a really unique and very special story. I think you guys get a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Absolutely.
I mean, and just listening to them too. And Susie is just driven.
And I often acknowledge how critical Susie has been, but I don't do that to take away collectively. Each of the individuals in that group are active and engaged, and they are just, most of them are just as invested. But Susie deserves the credit of pulling it all together. She makes sure we have productive meetings. She follows up with people. She genuinely cares. She reaches out, during COVID, she's been reaching out to folks just to say, hey, she's
the glue, right? She's the one that just kind of brings it all together and just kind of keeps it together and keeps it moving forward, keeps people engaged. And to your point, not that everybody else isn't contributing. They have their passion. That's why they're there.
Exactly.
But she definitely is the one that's staying. She wants to make sure this group is successful.
That's right.
And I think everybody else does too. But I don't think anybody would argue that Susie is definitely the glue of the group.
And sure. When you talk about the downstate program, as we have been, and asking me, what do I consider to be those key success factors? The ambassador group is at the top of the list because I'm just one person, right? And it's really through their initiative, them identifying. And Susie always says, are you going to own that? Which basically means, okay, you brought this forward to the group, so what do you need?
Yeah.
It's not here you go, you guys do it. It's like, how do we all play a role?
Yeah. I mean, if you have an idea that you think is a great idea, I think it's reasonable to say, okay, so how can we help you get it done? Right.
Exactly.
And that's where I think the success from this group comes from, because you'll see a lot of, and I'm not talking just organ donation advocates groups. So I'm just talking about some groups in general. What you see is, they'll bring an idea, they plop it down in front of the group, and they're waiting for somebody else to take that idea and make it happen. When really, if you want to get it done, just get it done.
Well, and you know what, Kay? I told Susie, I tried to do a little coaching when she agreed to this. And I said, listen, I've been in management for 25 plus years. And I said, the thing, and she's a bright woman. She didn't need me to tell her this, but in just trying to talk to her and help her to understand that I didn't want her to burn out. And so I felt like it was extremely important that people in the group felt empowered and accountable. Mm-hmm. You don't bring it to Susie and expect her to make it happen.
Right.
She'll help and I'll help. But at the end of the day, it's about that ownership.
Yeah. And you should.
Yeah.
You should. You just should. That's right. So let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So your experience losing Dan.
Yeah.
And going into this new role and just obviously changes your perspective of things.
Yep.
How much success do you think you would contribute to the loss that you went through, and how successful you are in this new role and what you've done in the community?
I would give it a large percentage. I would attribute a large percentage to having that experience to bring into this role. And certainly not that everybody needs to have, and God knows I don't want them to have that experience to have to be, but now I am one of those donor families. I am the one that has a personal story and experience. And honestly, I thought I was a compassionate person before Dan died, but I'm much more compassionate now. And my priorities have shifted, And so I truly don't even consider it part of my job going to the ambassador meetings. Now, Gift of Hope, I don't want you to hear that.
The disclaimer, she goes because she wants to and has to, right?
Right. No, just kidding. But truly, I mean, this has opened up my heart and my world in a different way. And that group is as much for me, you know what I mean, on a personal level as it is on a professional level. You're
invested in the group not just because you work for the Gift of Hope, but because you have that personal connection now. And so that group's for you too.
Yeah. And it's, I consider us to support. There's a lot of fellowship. It's not a formal support group, but there's a lot of fellowship that comes in the way of support.
I would agree. I think if you talk to the other ambassadors that have gone through, whatever they went through, whether they were an organ recipient or an organ donor, there's a different type of perspective you get when you have that conversation because, one, they understand, right? They really, truly do know where you're coming from. And they may have some words of wisdom that may help you and give you maybe help you think about something a little differently than you currently do, and it may help you, and I've had those conversations with people, and it's easy to have that conversation with those people,
and it's you hit it on the head. I'm always looking for words of wisdom. I feel like I've become wiser through this process, and I consider myself to be a lifelong learner. And I love inspiration. I love passion. I loved it before Dan died, but there is, I don't know if this transcends across time for everyone that has had a loss, whether it be a spouse or a child, but I think you can either choose, and I do think it's a hard choice, but I think you can either choose to see things, the world differently, and to look for those signs and those blessings. And, one of the things that has changed for me is I truly believe that we're all spirits in a human body, right?
Right.
Before Dan's death, I would have said we're all humans with a spirit. But that's changed for me. A lot of things, a lot of the way that I look at the world has changed, and my priorities have changed.
Yeah, there's some things that before Nick died would have probably just really honked me off, And now not to say that I don't have a temper and I don't get upset once in a while. I do. I get frustrated. We all do. It's human nature. But there are some things, honestly, I really just don't care about.
I could not agree more. I think that there's really something to that don't stress the small stuff.
Yeah.
And I was always a type A person. And I am not the same person I was 5 years ago. No. I'm not. I'm not the same person I was a year ago, but to me, I'm significantly different. If nothing else, it's in the way that I'm wired. I still like my ducks in a row most of the time, but I'm not a type A anymore. Not to the extreme.
It's like if somebody steals that parking spot, is that really worth my time going over there and yelling at that person or honking my horn or doing something stupid. It's not.
I mean, I'm still learning the virtue of patience. I got to admit that I am always being tested in the patience. I want answers. I want the crystal ball.
Yeah, I think we all want that. So, I mean, but I think, there's some.
But you're right.
But there are some things you're just like, you know what? I don't even care about that. So I'm not even putting energy into it because it's just not worth it. Because when I look at it, I'm like, ultimately, even if I put the energy into it, what am I getting out of it?
Well, and Dan and I, it was funny. So we were kind of yin and yang, right? I was sort of the wound a little bit tighter, type A kind of person, and he was more of the laid back, Lisa, shut your brain off. It's running too much. It's on overdrive. And he used to always be one of those guys that gave people the peace sign, right? Peace, peace. Well, I have acquired that one of my top priorities is peace. I want peace of mind. I want peace of heart. You know what I mean? And there really is something too where you say, okay, I am going to live my life to my priority, and whether it's family or peace or whatever it is, if you align what you do to whatever that priority is, there's this peace that I didn't have earlier in my life.
I think that's actually a really good place to start winding it down because I think that's fantastic advice. Well, because I like the way you said that. I live my life, priority is peace of mind, peace of heart, just peace in general. And I think that's some inspiration that people should try to get to because I think too many people, and it's proven if you just look at social media as a whole or what you see on the news or anything else, people aren't looking for peace right now. And we need that. We need a lot more of it.
Yeah, that's such a great point and I think that's why I get so frustrated with our current state of affairs.
I told Pam the other day, I said, can we just get past November let's just be done with this?
I mean, really, they have gone so off the rails, and I'm not getting political here. I'm just saying in general.
I agree. It's just crazy.
And so I appreciate, I do. I mean, you all can't see right now, but I'll just throw you the peace sign and say, really, if it's not a priority for you, I would challenge you to strive for it in some aspect of your priorities.
Yeah. So I think at home with your family, with your kids, with your dogs, whatever, there's got to be some place that you can get that peace, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody needs it. Everybody needs to have their own sanctuary.
And I think the other thing, as I was thinking about doing this interview, I was thinking about the random life lessons that I have had from the death experience of my husband, and certainly the striving for peace, right? And making peace. Because you know what? My husband never asked, why me? In his whole experience leading up to his death. And I had somebody that I work with at Gift of Hope say something to me, shortly after Dan's death. And she said, Lisa, why not you? And I've never forgot that. Because really, Dan was a special guy, but none of us are special enough to get a pass on the death card.
No, it's coming for us all.
So I would leave with that too, that sometimes, instead of saying, why me, sometimes we have to ask ourselves, why not me?
I'm writing that down because I'm gonna figure something out with that. I like that.
Yeah.
I really do. I'm going to take a couple seconds. I'm going to do some shameless plugs. For those who don't know, if you would like to register to be a donor, you can go to giftofhope.org and select register, and it will walk you through the process. It's very simple. Yes. You can register at your Secretary of State facilities. You can go to cyberdrive.com, and you can also register to be an organ donor there as well. I mean, those are just a few examples. If you have some questions, I would encourage you to get on the giftofhope.org website, and there's plenty of resources there that can guide you through any questions you may have, whether it be, personal, religious, what would your family think, all those types of things. Certainly get out there and research it, and hopefully we can, get a few more people to register and hopefully save some lives along the way.
Well, thanks, Kay. You're doing a great job.
Well, I appreciate it. I always love doing the work, so I'm glad you guys keep including me. I'm one of the long in the tooth now, right? I've been at it for 10 years, so.
Well, and I'm always putting a plug out there for you as far as having other people come in for an interview, because I support you all the way.
Yeah, and I'd love to have anybody that wants to come on. They're more than welcome to. I'll make the time for them, and we can, share their story and talk about anything. And so the whole point of the podcast is originally I named it, How Men Grieve, and I was trying to find a niche, but then I realized that that was a little short-sighted. I think there's a lot of amazing people out there with a lot of some amazing stories, and it isn't just about the loss or the grief of the loss. It's really what we come out afterwards and what we do with it. And your story is one of those inspirational ones. I think you've really taken that and you've made you've turned it into very positive for yourself. Yes, you miss your husband, no doubt about it. And of course, if we could all go back and change things, we would. We know that, but
right.
But we can't. And so you're making the best out of it, and you're learning your lessons. And like you said, you look for those little blessings, and I think you've really done a fantastic job. So thank you for keeping me in the loop with everybody, and I appreciate the support.
Peace to you and everybody out there.
And peace to you. So everybody, as you're listening, if you would just hit that like button, I'd really appreciate it. Or if you want to leave some comments and give me some ideas of what you'd like to hear, or maybe some different type of interviews you'd like me to do, I'm more than happy to do that. So everybody, again, thank you for listening. And until next time, peace.
Peace.